Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution, the radio program where we talk about looking for a job, changing jobs, changing careers, hiring. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy. Thy will be done. And in this session, I wanted to discuss what's called decision fatigue. This has to do with the other side of the desk, with hiring authorities getting just downright tired and sick and tired of having to make a decision about hiring. Last week, we discussed the challenge that candidates run into after they've taken so long to look for a job, and it's gone on a lot longer than they thought it would, and it's been really hard to do, and they become fatigued and they hit a wall about 4 or 5 months into looking for a job. Well, the same thing happens to hiring authorities. Nobody ever wants to admit this, but it's called decision fatigue. And it's when making a decision psychologically, the fatigue refers to the deterioration and the deteriorating quality of making a decision by an individual or a group of people after a long session of trying to make a decision. This came to mind over the last month or 2 months, where I had a client that was looking for a regional vice president of sales. They called and said that they needed to interview candidates. They had this long, drawn out, relatively antiquated process of interviewing of 6 interviews that the candidate was going to have to go through. So they went through a number of candidates, interviewed 2 or 3 of them initially, found one that they really liked, and went through the process. And it dragged on for almost 5 weeks. Finally, the candidate had one final interview with the CRO that was supposed to be just a check the box interview kind of thing. And the interview seemed to go really well with the CRO, but the CRO made a comment to the executive vice president who was doing the hiring. Well, at the very end of her debriefing with the executive vice president, I'm not really sure. Well, the executive vice president didn't want to, quote, make a mistake, unquote, which nobody wants to. And this thing had already gone on so long, everybody in the company knew this guy was taking way too much time. Everybody knew that their interviewing and hiring process was way too long. And so when the CRO made that comment, the hiring authority decided that he needed to keep looking. So we tooled up the interviewing process again, went through the whole thing again over about a 4 or 5 week period of time. Again, 4 or 5 interviews that the candidate was needing to go through. They get down to the final analysis and they go to offer him a job, and he ends up taking a job with someone else who had actually interviewed him and hired him within a 3-day period of time. Well, the hiring authority, as we've mentioned in this program before, the hiring authority looks like he's got egg on his face now. He's been through almost 10 weeks of interviewing. He's thought he was going to offer the job to 2 different candidates, loses one because of a minor comment by the CRO, and then loses one because the guy ends up taking another job with a company that was just much more decisive and made decisions really quickly. And now this guy, the hiring authority, looks like he can't really make a decision to everybody in the company. And this is everybody in the company knows what the situation is. And he's beginning to wonder what he looks like to them. Now, by now, they're really tired of this whole thing. And he's beginning to look like he can't make a decision. The company is looking like it can't make a decision. So they decide we're going to tool this thing up again. So we get him a few more candidates, and we don't hear from the guy, hear from the EVP. bottom line was he ended up promoting somebody from within. Now, this happened about 4 or 5 months ago, and it turns out from the people that we've talked to that the person that they hired from within really isn't doing all that well on the job. And it just so happens that we happen to know the person that they promoted from within. And he's a good guy, don't misunderstand me, a really good guy. But some of the candidates that these people interviewed were much, much better. And all of this came about because of decision fatigue. They just got so tired of trying to find somebody in the interviewing process that they just decided to hire somebody that was safe, that was in the company already. They could have done that 10 weeks ago before they made the decision, but they didn't, because they knew that thought they could find a good candidate externally. So you got to remind yourself, if you're a hiring authority, that decision fatigue may very well set in. If you're a candidate interviewing for a position and you find out that the company has been interviewing for a very long time, you've got to realize that they may very well suffer from decision fatigue. And when they do, they don't necessarily make really good decisions about hiring someone. So it's something that happens all the time, probably in lots of different business decisions, but people just get tired of having to make a decision. And sometimes when they suffer from decision fatigue, they don't make very good ones. All right, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. This is Tony Bashar with the Job Search Solution.